email chats with bands are honestly some of the most important parts of the whole project, from the very first email to having the album in your hands. Those early communications, how you communicate, the details you get across, set up how you are both going to handle the other stages. I've learned so many signs of red flags that I just instantly cut off certain projects now.
Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. As usual, it is your host, Lee, and today I have a art legend within the scene, Adrian Baxter. I know he's a pretty humble guy, so I hope he doesn't mind me calling him a legend, but he has graced artwork across many different types of illustrative mediums. He's done a bunch of album covers. A couple of credits that come to mind would be Paradise Lost, and he's done a lot of work for Halo Effect, who just released an album this year. Without further ado, Adrian, how's it going, man?
Hi, Lee. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. You've been on a list for a while.
Oh, I appreciate that. I've seen a few of your main episodes recently, and I've got it lined up to kind of catch up on your older ones. So I'm kind of slotting them in amongst the millions of other podcasts there are. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get there, and I've been really enjoying it. So thank you again.
I appreciate it. What have you been listening to recently?
So I kind of, for me, that question, I always split it into two groups in terms of what and how I listen to music for work. And I realize this is probably going to sound like a bit of a complicated setup to a super simple question. But I listen to all the kind of noisy metal stuff while I'm working, and then I go like the dark ambient route for when I need ideas and things like that. So lately, there's a band called Decline of the Eye that I've been a fan of for a while, and they've just released an album on Friday, and they've somehow leveled up from their other albums, and it kind of fits into the black metal genre, I guess, but that doesn't do them justice. They cover so much ground. So anyone who's into dark music, I can't recommend them enough, especially like this latest album. I don't know how they've managed it. But along with that, recently I've been spinning the new Vitriol record. The title escapes me at the moment, but their latest
from last
album,
year, right?
Yeah. I think it's one of those albums that the more you listen to, the more you get from it, detail-wise, and it's just incredible. So that's been on repeat a lot, and the new Veil Burner album as well. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've been looping both the Vitriol and the Veil Burner album just on loop.
They're both kind of They both have like some kind of technical spots and are pretty like out there, and like there's a level of intensity.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but it's intense, but they've got the perfect balance for me of letting it breathe and letting you absorb it, as well as kind of super in your face. And for me, that's the sweet spot for the technical death metal, black metal type thing. So yeah, while I'm working, that's all blasting away. But when I actually need to sit down and sketch ideas and kind of build the foundation of what I'm working on, there's a dark ambient label called Cyclic Law that basically, if I could create my perfect playlist of the ambience that I need, the textures, the sounds, I just go to them, pick any album. Even if I've not heard it before, I can guarantee that's what I need. And I don't really have any like specific artists. Well, there's Desideri Marginis. He comes up a lot. His works helps with my work. for a lot of years now. There's another artist that I believe is a solo project that I'm probably going to butcher the name, and I believe it's pronounced U Sala Sacral. And some of the, I don't even know how to describe it. Some of the atmosphere they create is just phenomenal. And that's kind of what I try and create in my work, in terms of like the old, ancient, recently discovered in a cave somewhere type vibe that really helps kind of get in that frame of thinking. So to answer your question very in a very long way, that's kind of where I'm at with what I'm listening to.
That's cool though, that you like have that level of I don't know, awareness in terms of like what brings out the best in the different scenarios.
I just know what I need from music in different scenarios. Yeah.
So the dark ambient, that's when you're doing like sketching and thumbnailing then?
Yeah, that's basically kind of stage one. I mean, I do listen to it sometimes when I'm working. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I get more from that style when I'm in those early stages of sort of trying to be focused with different ideas.
And that's just, I feel like I'm the opposite. Because like when I'm doing, because like I look at your work and there's a level of like discipline and tightness to like the final, you know, in terms of like I definitely want to learn more about like how you I don't know, use various tools to make sure like your lines are clean and stuff. But that's more like the illustration geek in me just wanting to know. But like when I'm doing stuff that's like just the line work and stuff, like I feel like I have to be in a very calming mood, or else I'll rush the line or something, and like it'll just look a little too sloppy. So like I'll put on something that's very relaxing. I'll just do a lot of like prog rock and classic rock, you know, in those kind of instances, and then you know, more of the intense metal. I listen to mostly when I'm driving in at the gym, frankly. I really listen to a lot of non-metal. Even though my channel is about like metal art, at least half the time I'm listening to various other genres.
Yeah, I think that's great. It makes the metal sound a little sweeter, I think, when you come back to it.
Yeah,
so I tend to listen to like lighter stuff in the summer for some reason. I'm a very seasonal listener. So the end of year is definitely darker, and then the summer's lighter. So I can definitely kind of see the benefit of having, but like you say, there's certain aspects in your life where you might prefer certain genres that might suit better. Like I wouldn't listen to the dark ambient on my way to do the food shop type thing. It's just those just wouldn't quite go together for me. But yeah, I kind of over the years of working, I definitely learned what benefits certain situations. But I think just with you saying about having the clean lines and being nice and relaxed, I think the way I maybe get around that is I spend so much time on my pencil work so that the lines are so crisp, so that when it comes to ink, there's no guessing. I know exactly what needs to be done. Yeah. So I feel like maybe our approach is maybe flip, so that I'm calm in the pencil sketch, get everything I need done, ready, and then I can, it sounds weird now I'm saying it, now I can relax while I'm inking. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And I was reading you use like a light board to transfer your pencils then to another sheet. So like what, let's say you have one piece. On average, how many sheets of paper in terms of the transfer are you working with?
3.
Okay.
So I'll have one main sheet that will be the full pencil render. I'll have a separate sheet that will be, how do I describe it? So I work with symmetry quite a lot. So I will draw one side and I will trace onto another separate sheet.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
All the different parts, flip them over and draw them onto the main sketch sheet. So I'll have I don't know if I've got one to hand. It's basically like,
it's like a mirror sheet.
Yeah, but it's full of like just random almost nothing's. So like just, I don't know how well you could see this, but this is an old pencil sketch.
Mm-hmm.
But there's half a part of snake there, which in that would have been like the other side, and then there's the half of the sword. And often I do both sides as well. So I end up with a sheet full of them, and they kind of cross over through different pieces as well. And then that's on like standard A3 kind of just normal paper. I don't really worry too much about the quality of that. That's just there to serve a purpose, you know. And then I have my main ink paper that is it's this stuff. It's Canson 180 GSM. And I've used this for years in A3 and A4, and it's exactly what I need.
Is it pretty low tooth in terms of the paper? Like pretty smooth?
I feel like it's probably somewhere in the middle, because I've tried some heavier papers and they just destroy the microns that I use. They just don't last 2 minutes.
I feel you.
So yeah, so I learned that pretty quickly. But then some of the thinner papers, I feel like don't really soak up the ink very well. So you lose some of that kind of the thicker black look.
Yeah.
So then as soon as I found the 180 GSM, that's it. That's all I need.
Nice. And do you typically stay within like a certain size, or do you like work really big and really small? Like kind of what's that look like for you?
So my biggest pieces are no bigger than A3, but I will do some pieces that are kind of more A5. Even like some of the smaller like symbol sigil style stuff that I do, that's probably even smaller than A5. Because generally my commission work, 90% of it is I'm just trying to find an example, is A3, a full piece. But then in between commissions, I generally, or while I'm waiting on feedback or just email replies, I'll do small line practices that are generally kind of about that big.
Yeah.
That are just kind of no more than a day, because I struggle to kind of commit to a new piece while I've got other things on. So if I'm halfway through a sketch and then I get an email back saying, yeah, great, let's go for it, that gets put to one side and back on the commission, and then that gets lost. So it needs to be a one and done for that piece. So obviously keeping it small keeps it nice and easy. And they're just fun little experiments for me. I get to play with layouts and different textures and stuff and not really worry too much, because 9 times out of 10 they're not really used for anything other than my own benefit, and just, you know, occasional upload to Instagram and Facebook and things like that. So I've considered going up to, in fact I did try a full A2 piece 5 or 6 years ago, and I got burnt out before I finished it. Like I did the full pencil sketch. It was across all these different A4 sheets. I taped them all together. It was this full piece. And I took 2 weeks off work to do it. And I'm not sure how long I lasted, but I got about halfway through the inking stage. And for whatever reason, I just burnt out on it. And I never finished it. It's still half finished. So that showed me A3 is enough. Because I don't know if yourself or other artists kind of relate to this, but it's very easy to spend too long on a piece that you know you enjoy because that's why you're working on it. But there's something in your head that kind of goes, I'm almost ready to move on. I've got new ideas.
Yeah.
So I don't struggle too much with that with the A3 size. The A2, I definitely do. So I've got a full pad of A2 paper that I've just not touched. But I could break it down and use it. But yeah, I did try, and I learned very quickly.
Yeah, I feel you. There's so many different ways of approaching it. Like for me, I'm always very impressed by artists who are just like brilliant at doing a sketch to a completed piece all in one sitting. Because for me, and it sounds like you, we're like more methodical artists. You know what I mean? And like, I'm sure we both can sketch well, but like, you know what I mean? Like those artists who just like, they just sketch and they finish it within hours. It's like, man, that's so cool. Because like, I don't have that.
Yeah, I definitely don't have that. Even my doodles are so terrible. I've shown a few online over the years, but even sketches for me are super basic. Unless I sit down and concentrate on my pencil work, I almost treat it like the final ink work.
Yeah,
and really iron it out, and I'll finish a piece, and then I will make myself wait overnight and then look again the day after, because there'll be something that will stand out that I will change, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. For anyone who can, like you see some artists that they'll sit out in a coffee shop or they'll sit in the park and just sketch, and it looks immaculate. And I'm like, I that absolutely baffles me, because I'd be so distracted, and it'd just be, not for me. But like you say, you have to learn what works for you.
Absolutely.
And you only really learn that by doing it. What size do you work out generally?
I fluctuate a lot. So
yeah,
one quick note. I'm always I'm kind of like jealous. I mean, I could like hop on the train, but like Americans for the most part, we never talk A3, A5, A2 like that. Like I know what it is. I'll look it up, but like I don't get why we just never like hopped on the board of like talking like standard sheet sizes. So I'm always thinking 11 by 14, 11 by 17, right. That kind of stuff. And then that's inches too. But yeah, I try not to. I've been working bigger because I try to use more brush now than microns, but I still use them a ton, especially on this current piece. It's funny, I'm working on a piece now that's very like pattern based, and it made me think of you. I was like, oh, it's perfect time I'm talking with you.
No.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. Do you mix brushes and pens together for one piece?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go between a couple of things. I use microns for really tight details. I love these Tombow brush pens that are pretty tight, and then I use a lot of like Winsor & Newton brushes with ink. I'm just looking at my materials here.
What ink do you use?
I experiment with a couple. There's for like big, solid, matte black areas. Like if I'm trying to make it look like it's on a shirt or something, I'll use this Deleter Black No. 2, which is a very thick, chunky ink that like manga artists use. It almost feels like paint, so it doesn't feel great. Like you can't get really good whip strokes with it, but it's great for getting out really solid areas. And then I use this Winsor & Newton India ink primer. That's my go-to. But I have like Sumi, and I experiment with other stuff too.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to make a note of some of those. I don't know if I've got one in. I use one brush pen, and I can never remember the name of it. But in terms of like solid black,
these
I can't remember.
Are great.
But yeah, I want to start kind of considering different brushes and things.
Yeah, I like a lot of the Japanese tools personally. I find that they're all really high quality.
It's Posca. The Posca brush pen is the one that I've used before. It's got a good black.
I use these white paint pens for slight corrections, like really tiny corrections, or like doing fibers or hairs. Yeah, a lot of like I try to get a lot of tricks from like the comic book artists that work on paper. I find a lot of them, especially because they're always working, man. I feel like people who work in the comic industry have like the best work ethic out of any artist I know. So I find a lot of inspiration from them.
I've not really looked too deep into that style over the years, but anything I have seen, and I'm sure there's a word for it, but where they use certain strokes for certain textures and details and shadows and things, that if you were to kind of isolate it, it's really simple. But as you kind of see the whole piece, it's exactly what needs to be for your eye to kind of put everything together. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but as you kind of
I know what you
sit
mean.
back and look at it, that certain stroke, that's its only job, to be in that place so that your eye kind of puts everything together. And
Well, I think Frazetta, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like I look at that all the time, that print, because it's just like you're saying, one stroke conveys three things. It's like incredible.
Yeah, the skill of using less is, for me, so much, and I sound like a hypocrite saying this as my work is so detailed. The skill of using less to show more is, for me, so much more impressive. Like I had to really make a note of pulling back on my details, because I really started taking my work seriously when the stippling thing was huge. It was everywhere, and I got caught up in that, and a lot of my pieces just ended up as pretty much big blobs of stippling, just mess. There was no space for anything to breathe. And as soon as I clocked that and kind of learned to pull back a little bit, because I knew I was always drawn to like cross-hatching, stippling, and like mixing the two for all these different textures and things. I knew I could find a balance of still letting things breathe, but also being intricate to look at if you got close enough, type thing. And I don't think I could ever. So I may be going off on a tangent now, but I outlined a lot of my work, a lot of my sections of my work with like a thicker micron. A lot of them will have that thicker outline just so they can kind of have their own space a little bit. And I've tried on numerous pieces to not do that, so that it's, in my head, maybe it looks not quite as blocky or too detailed or not. But then I look at it and my head just says it's not finished. And I've really tried it, and I was like, no. And I've learned that that's just, everyone has their own signature in the ways they ink or, paint or anything like that, So
I even try to resist it sometimes. I'll like look at somebody, I'm like, let me try inking like them. And sometimes it's successful, but there's like a compulsion to always make it look like me, whether I like it or not. Like it's a good thing. I mean, like, I think other artists, if I was telling this to other artists, to be like, lean into that. But for some reason with myself, I'm critical of it, because it's like you always think about what is natural to other people, and you maybe kind of wish you had, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. You have to find, because obviously we're all influenced by someone. There's no denying that. But then you have to bring that to what you are naturally driven towards, and the natural techniques and kind of things that just, when you're in that flow, that just happen. If you can have those be in the relationship for your work, then you will absolutely find your style 100%, just by drawing, just by painting, whatever it is you do. By doing that and keeping it in mind in terms of, these are my influences, this is what I enjoy looking at, the details, everything. The balance of not replicating that, but also not completely dismissing what you're drawn to. If you can meld those, I feel like you're in a really good position.
Totally. When it comes to art for you, then what was it like growing up and kind of getting towards like your first project in the music industry or whatever, kind of like professional illustration? What did that journey look like?
So probably like most other artists, I was always drawing as a kid. Everything, monsters, dragons, dinosaurs, everything. And my parents just constantly kept me supplied with pens and paper, and that was just my happy place. I did that for a lot of years just in my spare time, and it was always like just in the corner of paper. It was never anything like substantial. It was just not overthinking it, just as a kid would. And then I remember one day, probably in early to mid-teens. Something changed, and I drew something on an A4 sheet that was one piece, that was a considered piece. And I feel like that's probably like the moment I was like, right, okay, I want to, and I need to start really considering what I'm doing. Not in terms of like, because I want to do what I'm doing now, it's a career. Like, there was never any of that. I was never, I'd never plan on selling any of the pieces or anything like that. Excuse me. It was always just, this is something I need to do. This is something I wake up and I just do every day. So why not put the time in, put the consideration in, and kind of build from there. So I probably did that for a few years. And then just as kind of social media was, I'm sounding really old now, just as social media was like really picking up, I discovered other illustrators uploading progress shots and different artwork, and they had their own page for it. So for me, that was pretty much the only, other than the whole Last FM keeping track of what you're listening to, that was the only thing that brought me to the internet, was these illustrators and painters and everything that I could find, and the music, which looking back now is an absolute telltale of where I'm at now, like we've been saying about the music and the artwork pairing.
Yeah.
So as I was following them, I was kind of developing my own work. And back then I definitely caught myself unintentionally borrowing different motifs from different artists. And I draw it and I was like, why have I done that? That's something I've seen someone else do. So I was like, right, okay. And looking back, I'm really glad that I was aware enough to catch myself doing it. Like I say, I was younger. I was just kind of starting out. And I imagine it's probably more common than I realized at the time. And I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing certain motifs of mine come kind of back around in different artists that follow me, which is really nice, because I know how I felt when I did it. It was almost like a compliment thing. It wasn't anything malicious, but it was completely, I didn't realize I was doing it straight away. And that wasn't for any work that I was selling. I wasn't selling any work then. That was me just kind of finding out, again, what I was drawn to, what I wanted to put out, and learning my influences. Because I had a lot of like Alphonse Mucha, I can never know how to say it.
Oh yeah.
That style, I was obsessed with that style, and I don't know if copy's enough, but I'd really try and replicate certain parts of his work. And I realized that, I mean, at the time it was fine, but I realized that wasn't me. Yeah. That was just something I saw, I like, so I drew it. Which I feel like is probably a natural stage to go through. And then I kind of found myself just on my own. I'd kind of lost a lot of the influence of what I was seeing, and I let myself distance myself from it. Like, I don't follow a lot of artists closely anymore. And I know that might sound a little weird for someone who's so involved, but I have to really kind of monitor how much attention I'm paying to other people's work. Just because I know somewhere one day that little thing of like you said, the influence coming into my own work, even though it's something I may have seen somewhere else, I don't want that ever happening again. And that's, right. I'm certainly not saying all my work is 100% original. Of course not. I draw skulls. It's absolutely not. But in terms of how I approach my work and the atmosphere I want to deliver with my work has to be 100% me.
Yeah.
So if I kind of let too much outside influence visually dictate that, then for me, I'm not quite on the path that I want to be.
Well, especially from peers and people operating today. It's like one thing to be really influenced by Mucha, who I mean, a lot of people are influenced by him, myself included, for sure. I'm actually working on a piece right now that some people might be like, "Oh, it's a Buka ripoff." It's treading the line, but it's definitely an homage. But yeah, it's. I find myself kind of thinking the same way of like, I want to be influenced by people outside of the scene, and ideally have been dead for a long time, so that it can be my own voice as well. So I totally relate with what you're saying. It's not from a place of like not being interested in other people's work, but
no,
yeah, just like we're sponges whether we like it or not. So you're kind of like protecting yourself from that.
One thing for me, the one main reason I follow the artists that I do is because I love seeing them work so hard at what they're doing. That's the inspiration that I really want to take on. That's something I can absorb. You know, you see artists working on their own stuff, or whether it could be someone you've followed for years and suddenly they get a big commission. And that feeling of like, I know how hard you've been working because I've seen it online, or we might have chatted online or something, and you just feel great for that artist. You're like, finally, it's working. Like, keep going, keep going. But you kind of send a message of like, whatever you're doing is working, keep going. So that's why I've not like completely unfollowed everyone type thing. Like, I love seeing the community interact with everyone, seeing people work at what they do. And I think when you've been following other illustrators or artists generally for long enough, you see when they've hit that next level for them.
Yeah.
You'll see a piece and you'll be like, something else has clicked for you. And we don't always see what it is, but you just notice something and you kind of go, right, you stepped up. Because I feel like everyone who puts the effort in, you feel the steps up. You know, you aim for where you want to be for all the other artists that you see, but everyone has their own step towards that. And I think for the people regularly uploading their work, which is amazing that it's so popular these days, we get to see it in real time.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I totally feel what you're saying. Probably one of the best parts about this channel is that, you know, because I'll do a slight plug. There's a Discord server that's loosely affiliated with this channel, and it's for artists of all skill levels. And it's really cool seeing people support each other through those milestones. And it's cool seeing professionals helping out people who have only been doing it for like a year or two. So I think if you're watching this and you're interested in visual art, you know, it's a good pursuit to have, because you become ideally a better version of yourself through the process. Like, you get better as an artist, but you get better as a person and character too, because of all that persistence and rejection from yourself, of like thinking, you know, you pushing through inferior work, or your ego getting in the way and all that kind of stuff. But
it's a very humbling industry.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Say that. Like, in terms of like, I always wonder if someone sees a creative uploading their work online and maybe feel like, oh, they must be super confident in their work and in themselves, and like they're not worried about what anyone thinks or says or anything. And I don't think that could be further from the truth. That's us kind of showing our work is like the very last piece of bravery that comes after even starting in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't even start. They're not where they feel like they would want to be. And they don't have the inspiration, the motivation to start at square one, whether that's at 8 years old or 38 years old. It's different for everyone. I think having the inspiration and the motivation to kind of keep stepping through it, that's the only thing that I think that's probably the most important thing. And I feel like I'm going on a bit of a tangent now.
Oh, no, that's the whole purpose of the conversation.
But I feel like, as I was saying about seeing other artists and illustrators, especially in my early days, that keeps that momentum going. And I think if you're so isolated, it'd be so easy to lose that. So just if there's anyone listening that's considering either starting or uploading their work or getting involved, just do it. Nothing horrendous is ever going to happen, you like you said, Lee, you'll learn a hell of a lot about yourself in the best way, and you'll look back in a year, 2 years, 3 years time, and you'll be so glad you did.
Yeah, absolutely. And shifting slightly, I had a question I want to ask you. So I was curious how you've learned the digital part of art and like finishing a piece for, you know, the use of like an album cover, and related to that, your decision to keep some of the process still on paper and not move everything to the digital arena. I was wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, sure. So years ago, I was naively adamant that I was never going to do anything digital with my work, creative-wise. I was so stuck on being 100% traditional. And the more I tried different paints, colors, inks, everything, I was just never ever happy. And I'm not sure if that's, I never really found the right product, or I never put enough work in or anything. But it got to the point where I was like, let me just see what I can add from the digital space without taking anything away from the original ink work. That's something I've always said, like the ink work has to be pretty much exactly as like the sheets of paper I've seen. I don't want to change anything on that. And then just the more I experimented, I realized I could get closer to the textures and the shades that I wanted without ruining an original piece every time. And that's all it was. I realized I was holding myself back because I definitely wanted to add more color texture. Like I used to stain paper with tea and do all that kind of thing. But then if that didn't go right, I'd kind of spent like most of a week on this A3 piece. It's like, okay, a little disheartening.
Yeah.
So I allowed myself the digital side of it. And I've still got a strange relationship with the digital work that I do, which is basically just colors and textures. But I'd rather kind of stick with that and improve my relationship with that than completely dismiss it. Because obviously it's helped in terms of, because certain bands sometimes want certain color schemes or like different examples of color schemes that I can offer them and things like that. And I admire any artist who can paint a piece, an original piece, to the exact spec that they've spoken about with the band, and kind of deliver it and just get it without any changes needed. You know, when it comes to like traditional paints and stuff, to me, I can't even let that in my brain. And that's a skill in itself, I believe.
Yeah.
So for me, having that space to kind of experiment with the digital work, just kind of, I've just stuck with it, and it's working. But I've not let my original ink work change in any way because of that. I still use, as we've seen, paper, pens, pencils, rulers, everything. But it also lets me get some digital sketches done as well. In the really early days of, or in the early stages of working with bands, I'll often send them like a super quick digital sketch that I can save, send, I can have feedback on, and the process is so much quicker, and we can iron all the details out that we need. And then I take that to my desk and kind of draw up a full pencil sketch from that. So anyone who's worked with bands before, you spend time on a pencil sketch, send it, and they need edits. That's physical erasing, or you start again, and kind of, there is a beauty in that. I feel like, but in the middle of a project, sometimes it's so soul destroying, that getting all the early work out with the digital side of it just makes absolute sense for me and the band I'm working with. We can get to where we need to be so much quicker. And obviously with layout, things like that, we can experiment with layouts and stuff for the albums.
When you work with bands, do you typically do the entire thing when it comes to the album, like the inner notes, the back, the front, like some of the graphic design and layout parts, as well as just illustration?
It varies, to be honest. So something I always say with my bands is I never want anything rushed for my sake or their sake. Neither of us want any rushed work. If my schedule and their planned release will allow me to work on the layout as well as all the illustrations, I will do it. But I feel like probably half of the time I say, if you have, like some bands, they'll have their own graphics person that will take care of all that. And they are at a similar level to where I'm at with my traditional work, so that they can do it so much quicker. I'm still kind of learning on the spot with a lot of the digital stuff. Mm-hmm. So in terms of all a lot of the elaborate stuff, I usually recommend they get an actual graphic designer to kind of take my work and get it laid out exactly as they need it across all the different formats. I've got one or two friends that do it that I've recommended over the years, but like I say, sometimes they have their own person to do that, and I'm more than happy to take care of everything I need to, pass it on, which is exactly what they do with the halo effect. I do all the traditional illustrations, and then basically send them all the high-res Photoshop stuff. Nicholas Sundin does all their graphic design work. And then, thankfully, which I wish every band did this, before anything gets passed on beyond him, I get a heads up. This is what we've done with your work. How do you feel about it? I mean, I don't think I've ever questioned anything yet, but just them recognizing, yeah, it's incredible and so unheard of. I mean, there's bands I've even asked for that. I've said, once you feel like you're in a final stage, please just kind of run it by me, and they haven't. And it's a little disheartening, but it is what it is. You know, everyone kind of sees it differently. But with the halo effect, they're all legends in the scene, so they've done this countless times. They know, and I can tell they really appreciate everyone involved with every step of everything. So that's something I definitely appreciate with working with them. And I've kind of learned over the years what to ask for with projects, that being one of the examples. But in terms of, there's been a lot of projects I've got to the end of and been a little disheartened with how they've handled my work. So I try and get ahead of that sometimes, and most of them are fine, because you don't want like the announcement to pop up online with your work and they've chopped and changed, they've done all this and that and the other, and you kind of like, I wish you'd have just run it by me first. I could have maybe advised on this and that and the other.
Yeah.
But I feel
I've heard that from multiple artists, so you're not alone in that.
Yeah, it is a shame. And you kind of never really know which bands are going to think like that until it happens, or until they check back in and kind of run it by you. And you're kind of like, all right, okay, I see you've had enough experience to kind of to think along those lines.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of good points. I mean, the first one that I really like too is partnering up with other artists who have expertise and skill levels that maybe you or whoever's listening don't have. Mm-hmm. Like for me, I'm not a graphic designer, so I work a lot with my wife on stuff. She's like my partner. And then beyond that, I have other friends who are graphic designers, so I can get opinions and help with at times. And I think it's important to like have that kind of like network and people you can trust. Because that, like you said, everybody brings something different to the table, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
The second thing too, I guess, what are a couple other, or maybe expand upon like some of the lessons from like the business side that you feel comfortable sharing that have helped you out over the years?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the lessons you could pass on, but you almost have to learn in the moment and learn how it feels. So there's a balance of having a confidence with what you need within a project that doesn't spill over into arrogance and demanding. I always try and think of my side and the band side as being two very, very similar positions. They need something from me. They've approached me. They need a list of different concepts or artwork, whatever. But it's also absolutely fine for me to say yes, but within the process, I don't know if needs the wrong word, but it would benefit all of us if you could meet these requirements. And I feel like those requirements are probably a little bit different for everyone, depending on how everyone works. So one of mine, just as an example, is if at any point during the middle of our discussions, you are suddenly on tour for 3 weeks or whatever, if you need time off, just let me know. Because if I email a sketch and say, how's this looking? And you don't hear anything for weeks, in my schedule, I've probably got 2 other projects that within those 3 weeks I can be working on. So if I know that those are booked out for the band, I can go, here's a sketch. Don't worry about getting back to me. We'll come back to that in 3 weeks. Yeah. I can work on this, get some, momentum with this or whatever. Whereas, like I said previously, if I started on something else when I hadn't heard back, and then suddenly I get the email of, yeah, go, I'm kind of like in the middle of 2 or 3 different projects then.
Yeah.
So I think there's details like that of your own process that you learn what benefits the whole project. And it's absolutely fine to ask for those politely, not arrogantly, because most times you will be met with whatever you project out, usually you'll be met with the same. If you're demanding, arrogant, most bands will be like, either I'm not working with you or, okay, we're going to play it like that. And it's not a nice environment. And thankfully, I've not had that, but I've heard stories of that over the years. So if you just kind of say, like I say, it'll benefit everyone if we can meet this. That's one of the strongest pieces of advice, because some of the early email chats with bands are honestly some of the most important parts of the whole project, from the very first email to having the album in your hands. Those early communications, how you communicate, the details you get across, set up how you are both going to handle the other stages. I've learned so many signs of red flags that I just instantly cut off certain projects now because of how they handle the early simple things is usually a projection of how they're handling the quite important commission fees or feedback detail or things like that are, when you're working with tight deadlines, those are very, very important, because if you don't meet the deadline, it's on me. It's on the artist, even though sometimes if they unintentionally interrupt that, it's still on me. So in short, learn what you need, respectfully ask that they meet that. Sometimes they can't, but if you ask respectively, it'll work so much easier, and it'll make the project so much more fun. And you'll get to the end and there'll be no resentment or anything like that. No one wants any of that. And then you have the chance of the band working with you again, which is win-win.
Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points. It's one reason why I if someone DMs me on like Instagram and they want to work, I do shift the conversation over to email, because email requires more thoughtfulness and taking time in terms of your responses, and you don't be impulsive or anything. So I do think that's solid advice that I've gotten from other artists too. Is like email. First of all, it's just more organized, but it just there's a social norm around how you act over email that you don't over DMs.
Yes, I 100% agree. I don't mind having the first interaction on DM,
Yeah.
assuming Instagram lets me see it. But like you say, as soon as
yeah, I feel you there.
I mean, I've had so many. I've had an email saying I've been trying to contact you for months, and I've not had an email, and like, no, this is the first email. I'm like, okay, now we can carry on. But yeah, I 100% agree with that. Because again, for me, that's a sign of how you are projected to handle things in the future. Instagram is super informal, casual, and I understand a lot of bands that don't want to kind of maybe be too sterile and professional, maybe, you know. But in terms of like working together for something quite serious, I think it's worth doing for everyone's sake.
Yeah, totally. It's not like, we're wearing suits, inking or anything. Like we're still casual people. It's just
it's just taking what we do seriously. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of bands take different aspects of their kind of responsibilities just as serious, and there's no reason why we shouldn't as well.
Totally. Thinking back to maybe the creative side of art and stuff, you're talking a little bit about how you've like experimented to like find out what your style and what your strengths are. I was just kind of curious, like, what was that kind of experience like, and what at this current stage are there like areas of your art that you're looking to improve this next year?
Yeah, I feel like the first one to come up would be all my digital work. I want it to look less and less digital, which is a silly statement to make, really. But with the technology now and the layering and everything, I feel like I'm kind of slowly getting to where I want to be. Maybe, I don't know if it's an improvement thing, but I definitely want and need to book more time for my own personal work.
Yeah.
Because thankfully I've been really busy with commissions for a while now, which is a great place to be in. But for those to, for me to work on those comfortably, I definitely need space for my own personal work. So I think probably to improve my scheduling, I think that would be the thing. Because I definitely benefit from having a week or two of having no restrictions. Obviously, working with bands, there's always going to be some give and take.
Yeah.
I say always. Some artists can get away with none. That's great. And I generally don't mind a bit of back and forth with things. But after so long, I definitely feel the need to kind of get whatever it is I need to get out and experiment and try new things, and whether that's different patterns, different layouts, anything. So that's something that's definitely on my list. And I also get more room to experiment with the digital side as well. Because again, I'm not kind of under any particular brief. And that's why I do a lot of these smaller line practices so that I can, like, if anyone's been following my work for a while, they'll see, like, I'll make something, but then I'll cut and chop it digitally and kind of play about with different things. And that's generally just for me to play. That's just for my brain to kind of loosen up, play with different things. And then I can carry some of those ideas either into commission works or my own works. So I definitely need more time for that. I don't know if there's anything else I really want to concentrate on. Maybe I need to get back to my reading more, because that's something that definitely helps the creative brain keep ticking. I think once you get lost in a lot of the boring everyday stuff, personally, I end up carrying that into my work somehow, whether it's lack of ideas or just ideas I've already done or something like that. So anything outside, basically anything outside this room, I need to really kind of concentrate on what I'm consuming, what I'm watching, listening to, everything, because it does affect my work quite a lot. So I suppose that's my list.
That's a good list.
Something else might come to mind another day, but I feel like those aren't anything new. That's something I'm always trying to really concentrate on as well, those areas.
Yeah. When I look at your work, some of the things that impress me the most, and I mean, I love all of it. Like, you just have really good sense of like design and the fact that you're using, on paper, hand-drawn illustration and bringing it digitally, I think is really, really cool and inspirational, because that's kind of how I want to approach it too, when I need to for certain projects. But like, your level of craftsmanship is like really, really high. Like, I how do I say this? I use rulers. I use like different kind of like illustration tools, just like people have been doing, since like the 40s onward, like some of that golden age illustration stuff. But like, is that always been kind of natural for you? Like that level of like precision? And I was talking about like getting those like really clean lines, but I don't know. I'm kind of just giving into kind of a broad, vague question, but if there's any like rulers or tips you've learned to get things look really like neat and clean, I'd love to hear them.
I would love to tell you a particular brand or material of ruler. But I'm afraid it's just a ruler that I use.
Just a standard one, not like a T-square or anything?
No. I can show you my main tools.
Okay. I got a few I can share too, for the audience, or maybe for you too.
I've got a weird one to show you at the end of this as well, that I think, I'm not sure if it's a standard desk item for an illustrator or not, but maybe someone can be inspired by it. So yeah, just a normal shatterproof ruler. Super easy.
Nice.
I've tried metal ones, and the texture while I'm using them makes my skin crawl, which is very weird, but just a good old plastic ruler.
See, I use the metal ones. Sometimes the pen creeps underneath the ruler when I'm cutting a line. That's the thing that drives me nuts about it.
Right. Okay. I should have mentioned this. I don't use any rulers with my ink.
Okay.
I only use rulers with the pencil work. And this kind of goes back to me putting as much as I can into the pencil work, so that it's just so that the lines I'm drawing over are super straight, and then I just rely on my hand and my breath to kind of get that as. I mean, I don't strive for it. Yeah, I don't strive for the perfect line with my ink. I'm more than happy to have some character, some hand-drawn character. I used to, like back in the day, but I used to leave pencil. So let me come back a little bit. I used to ink straight over pencil work. No light box, no different sheets of paper. I'd just go straight on. And then for some time, I'd erase the pencil lines around the ink. And then you end up erasing some of the ink. Then you end up relining things, and it's just a pain. But then I went through like a bit of a phase of like, I used to leave pencil marks in just so that people knew it was hand drawn. And then it's ridiculous. And it was only a short period of time. And I look back and I'm like, your work wasn't even that great. They absolutely know it's hand drawn. And like, who am I kidding? It's not like, you're going to think it's a digital thing. So now I look back on that and I go, don't strive for like perfect lines ink-wise. Allow a bit of character. And I think that's where the microns, for me, are the perfect balance of, you can use a ruler if you want. I know you sometimes get a bit of the bleed, but you can get a super straight line, or you can get some like quite flowy, free flow lines with them. and for me, they cater for both. And even once they've started to wear, you can get a lot of good textures out of them because like they're slightly faded and like you can really kind of use a lot of the old ones. So once I'm done with a pen, I kind of, it's in its own pile, and that's like the texture pile that I kind of really wear it down until it's like almost gone. Then you're like, right, I have to.
The nib is like slanted. That's what happens to me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a tiny, tiny bit left because I hate throwing them pens away because they're plastic. They're not reusable. Oh, yeah. That's the only thing I hate about them. But the other thing is I use this heavy duty compass that weighs quite a bit for a lot of the circles and stuff. Mm. And again, I've tried others over the years that have just failed and they just kind of mess up what you're doing. So they're worth investing in for me. That wasn't not super expensive, but it wasn't super cheap, but you can feel it's absolutely solid. That's not going anywhere. I've recently started, using a pencil extender holder.
Oh, yeah.
So many artists must have millions of tiny little pencils. I know I do. I have piles of them. Bought one of them, stick it in the end. You got normal pencil in.
It's a good tool.
Yeah. And then pencil sharpener, easy. I'm too cheap to buy a big electric fancy one from my desk. That's not happening.
I got one right here.
I
use mechanical pencils though sometimes for like.
I've tried those. Yeah.
I like them when I'm tightening up, but like when I'm sketching, I use a lot of times I go for the 3H pencils.
Me too. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the right amount of hardness for me.
I think it's 3B. I go to sometimes as well.
Okay.
B and 3B for the shading and the lines. But I use the Tombow. Oh no, they're not Tombow, they're Faber-Castell. I used to use the Tombow. Faber-Castell pencils. They're great.
What about these? You use... Oh my god, I have so much trouble picking them up. But this big one. But do you use French curves at all?
No, I've got... I sometimes use this. It's just circles.
Yep, I got one of those around standby.
But again, it sometimes bleeds underneath, like you say. So I'm kind of... I will use that for the pencil work, but then for the ink work, I'll take a deep breath and I'll try and do that freehand, which sometimes goes okay. It's always a bit of a tense moment when I try and freehand a perfect circle, but there we go. And
the most a lot of that recently.
Sorry, go on.
The freehand perfect circles. This whole weekend, outside of this, I've been working on this piece, the Muka one, and I made so many circles in this design. So it's been kind of a pain in the ass, and like I have a pretty good stamina for like that kind of stuff that's like not that fun to do. Mm-hmm. This one's definitely getting towards the end of that, but I'm about to do like a fun part where I'll just lay down a bunch of ink and I'll get over it, but. I can relate right now at this exact moment.
So for those circles, do you concentrate on your breath at all?
Yes, and I warm up my hand a lot. But a lot of it is just being warm and in a state of flow, and that's when they usually turn out good. And I also am not attached to them being perfect. I think that's part of it too. It's just like being comfortable and knowing it's not going to be exact. Yeah.
So for me, what helps is posture. This is going to sound silly to a lot of people, but I think some people can help. So posture and your hand position, these things all kind of come together for me to make it work. And this is not me saying this is how to draw a perfect circle. I do not draw perfect circles. This just kind of helps at least them look like a circle. I've found that depending on how my hand sits on the paper, whether I've got a jumper over, that helps me push and pull the lines around, because I'll kind of do a circle in sections and then I'll move the paper around and kind of work my way around that way instead of kind of sticking to one position. For the circles and the lines, keeping my breath calm, not holding my breath, because that definitely doesn't help for me. Kind of doing it in sections and recognizing all of these things definitely helps. So I think it's probably another tip I can pass on.
Turning the paper is key. I turn my paper all the time.
Yeah, because as soon as I learned about the whole push and pull lines and when to use either, that completely changed it for me. And like you say, rotating paper. This is why I don't put out many videos of my ink work. Like, I've done a few over the years, but because I'm constantly turning it, and then I'm like checking if it's in shot, and then I like turn it, and again I have to make sure I'm cool, and I'm just like, no one wants to watch this.
I know. I do these live drawings, and I realize how much I'm terrible at that. The exact same thing you're talking about.
It's not a natural thing to do, to be like stagnant. Like, I'll always appreciate how painters can have their canvas there, and maybe like they have to move their bodies, I would imagine, unless they're just so skilled enough. I have no idea. But I use masking tape so that the ink sheet I tape to the pencil sheet
on the light board,
so that they can kind of move around together. But I used to tape both sheets to the light pad. Yeah. And I don't think that lasted long, because I realized I had to move it. 2 sheets of paper are easier to move than a light pad. So I stopped taping them to them, life lessons and all that. So yeah, it's so much easier kind of swiveling things around, and the light pad's been an absolute game changer for me in terms of like really keeping my ink work super clean. Like I said before about the erasing the pencil and stuff, as soon as I learned about the light pad, I was like, that's just going to fix everything for me, especially like with putting the sketches together as well, because I use that just as much for the pencil work as I do for the ink work. Yeah. And then it helped me kind of just tighten everything up and really get everything just as I needed it. And I've had a few over the years. Some of them can be a bit flimsy, but it's the Mini Sun A3. I think they're quite common, quite popular. I've had a few of them over the years. They've been great.
My brother actually built me a light board 14 years ago. I've been using it ever since.
Nice.
It's just like solid wood. It's heavy.
Right.
It's thick. That's the only thing, is like if I'm doing it a lot, it can kind of... That's the next question I want to ask you too, is just like posture and angle for when you work, because I'm still working flat and I try to do stretching, but I know eventually I probably need to shift to working at an angle. But yeah, this light board, it's really thick, and it's just made out of like cheap wood. Then he has a sheet of like plexiglass, and then one of those lights that just lasts forever. I think some kind of LED. And then he has like a sheet of paper, so it kind of diffuses the light a little bit. It's pretty bright. It'd be nice if I could adjust the lighting settings, but on Bristol board, which I work on, it works just fine. It's when I try to transfer on watercolor paper that I have to guess more.
Yeah. So is that
I can't see that line.
Is that built into a desk, or is that standalone?
No, a stand. I move it over to the desk.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. Do you work flat, or what's it kind of look like in terms of your working arrangement?
Yeah, I'm working flat.
Yeah.
Much to the disappointment of my lower back, because obviously you can't, if you were to sit like I'm sat comfortably now, for me to draw flat, my hand's way too far away. I need to be over it. I've tried a couple of angled kind of desk supports over the years, and I don't know if I'm just so used to working flat that it wasn't for me, or if it's just not a natural position for me to kind of be at that angle. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm working flat. It's just so much easier for me.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth the back pain at this point.
Before we shift to pulling up some of your art and talking through it, anything else you want to chat about on kind of like some of the questions we covered before this, or anything that comes to mind?
No, nothing. Maybe one quick piece of advice that I could pass on, maybe, that I've learned over the years, is to recognize, like, for anyone who's regularly making art that does want to start getting commissions or work with bands and things like that, I think one of the most important things is to see whatever work you are putting out, that is your portfolio. That is the bait, for want of a better word, that potential clients can pick you up on. So consider everything that you put out a possibility to catch someone's eye. And if they use that as reference, if you can be happy with that piece, great. So I think my point is to, if you whatever it is you're sharing, put the effort in before it gets to the point of being shared. Because if you put out something that is either maybe not what you're drawn to, or that you feel like bands want, or that is what you feel like people want to see, as soon as someone uses that as a reference, you're kind of stuck with that then. Does that make sense? It's like, because I actually ask some band, I ask every band if there's any pieces of my work in particular that got them to email me that they want their own piece to kind of aim towards. I'm happy to see it, because I kind of cover a couple of different types of styles within my style. I feel like some people just want black and white. They don't want ornate pieces, or they do. So it helps with that. So if I was to put out something that was half-assed or that I wasn't fully happy with, and they showed me, we want this, I'm kind of stuck in a position then of like, I don't really want to do that, because I felt like at the time that's what someone wanted to see. It's a little bit long-winded, but I think my point is just to kind of be conscious of anything you put out could be the start of your path to working with bands.
Yeah, I like that. I guess, would you agree then that you don't have to post everything you create? Sometimes you can just create stuff for yourself.
100%. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with posting sketches, quick ideas, because I feel like there is an audience for seeing almost like behind the scenes stuff. They want to see certain process shots and things like that. But that you still have to be 100% happy with whatever you put out. To me, whether it's like I've shared photos of just quick ink doodles while I've been sat watching the TV, and it's just skulls and snakes and things like that. I don't mind sharing that, because I'm not really attached to that. And I know that that's not really going to come up in anything that a band asks. But in terms of work that you put out, it always has to be for you, whether you share it or not. I think that's the key thing. And I've pieces in the pile of paper that I don't think I've ever, whether I've finished or not, I've just chosen not to do anything with, because for whatever reason I've got the idea out and it wasn't what I imagined or anything. So don't be scared to, don't feel pressured into uploading everything you ever do. Absolutely not. But also don't be scared to show some loose sketches and stuff, because people enjoy that. And that's not imperfection. That's just part of what you do.
Yeah. And I find sometimes the sketches get the most engagement too, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Because people like that peek behind the curtain, you know?
Exactly. I asked on my Facebook years ago, just out of interest, if people preferred just seeing the full complete piece and then that's it, nothing else of each thing I do. Or, because I used to post a shot of the pencil sketch and then a couple of ink progress shots. And I'd post like the first set of lines, the base lines, and then the details, and then the solid black. I'd post like 4 or 5 photos, working my way through it, and then eventually I'd post the full final piece. And when I asked that question, I think there's only one person that said, I don't care for the rest of it. I just want to see the final thing. Everyone else was like, I mean, it's fair enough. I asked, I really didn't mind.
Yeah, that's straight.
I love his honesty, I'd rather that than the opposite of not wanting to see what it looked like and just wanting to see the process. And everyone else was just like, either didn't care or was like, yeah, we're happy to see it. And it wasn't something I was battling with. It was just out of interest, just because I've always been interested of how people perceive my work and how I perceive other artists' work. How you see your own work will be completely different to how 10 other people see your work. So I think kind of accepting that and coming to terms with that is a really healthy thing, which can be tricky. But yeah, it definitely made me laugh with that guy who was just like super honest. But yeah, fair enough. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to upload progress because of whatever reason, don't do it. Even if people, have liked seeing other people's, if that isn't for you, fair enough.
Yeah.
You have full control.
Excellent points and a lot of good nuggets for people to chew on, including myself. I get one question before we go to it, in terms of showing the work. You mentioned like how you perceive your art might not be how other people perceive it. Do you have any examples of like that difference that you can kind of come to mind, or like how do you typically see your work? Because I'm curious if I see it in a pretty similar way.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun one to put into words, I think. I don't know if I've ever tried to explain it.
Yeah, it's kind of abstract.
So, like I mentioned before, there's a certain aesthetic that I really want to put forward in my work. And I feel like it's only fair to accept that different people will see the final. They'll kind of get their own interpretation of that final work because they don't know what was in here during all the build up to it. I don't lay out a sheet of text explaining to go with the piece of work. That's just not how it works. And all my experience or music input that's kind of got me to that point, no one else is going to feel that. So I kind of, again, I do everything I have control over, put that out there, and then kind of, I've had so many people like comment and say their interpretations of different things. They've read into certain symbols and the links of symbols and the colors I've used, which is amazing. I genuinely love seeing it, but it's never once lined up with my intent with it, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that's the beauty of what we all do and how we all kind of interpret it within that kind of large circle. There's so many crossovers of, I feel like it's everyone's life experience affects how they take things in, and that's absolutely for visual art as well. Just as much as it's almost like a middle meeting point. All my life experience gets me to this point of finishing and uploading the work. Then someone else's life experience will get to this point and meet my work, and both sides of those are just as important as each other. And I think that's just the beauty of it. It's same with music. It's same for film, dance, everything. And I think if any creatives kind of let themselves overthink it, I think they'll be stuck, and it will affect the work negatively. I think there's a beauty in kind of just loosening up and just letting things be as they are in terms of interpretation. I think just let things roll.
Awesome. Well, let's pivot to some of these examples here. So to start out, we have the new Halo Effect album, and we got the ink right off to the side. And if it helps you out, and also the viewers, I always go full screen at this point because it's pretty tiny in this platform. So if you feel inclined, that can help out a little bit. But yeah, go ahead, tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, so this is the second album that I did for the Halo Effect. The color scheme was not my decision. That's something that they did afterwards. Like I said earlier about having their graphics guy kind of work on that. They sent me like maybe 6 or 7 different color schemes, and we all kind of discussed where we felt it was going. And I think in the end, I just kind of said, I'm happy with all of them. Just, whatever the majority goes with, I'm happy with. So the process for this was exactly the same as the first album, in the sense that I got the album early, thankfully, which I generally don't over listen to because I don't really connect with it straight away because I have no visuals. And I think that's the beauty of having album art and the album together. For anyone buying it and listening to it, there's a kind of beauty in their matching. So I listen to it, I get the general vibe. I mean, for this second album, I knew exactly what it was going to be. It was just going to be more of the first album in the best way. But I read through Michael's lyrics quite intensely, and I pick out phrases, words, and kind of gauge how I take them in. And I don't know if I can remember anything specific of like different areas of the album art, but it's a lot of it's kind of dealing with things in your own head and how that affects your outer life and kind of all those types of things. So like the pillars and the leaves are all kind of like knowledge and progression and things like that. So I definitely try and get the symbolism in there, but also mix it with layouts and kind of some of the decoration and stuff. So I feel like you can overdo both sides of that. So I always try and find a nice balance. Yeah. And then sometimes on an album cover, I like to draw a space for the titles and the logo, and others I don't. I always kind of wing it really and see what feels best. But the logo on the album's one that I made right in the early stage. I think I even made that before I even did the first album cover. And that was a really quick idea that just happened to land and was just like, all the guys liked it. So I kind of cleaned up a little bit and it's just stuck.
So how did you make the logo then? Was that fully digital or you did things on paper?
I got the basis of it digitally and then drew it all by hand. Just to kind of, I feel like if I'd have done that fully digitally, it might not have always lined up with the album art. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of thinking ahead in that sense because it might have looked a little bit too kind of stuck on. I mean, that's not to say that I've not drawn that into the album art. That is definitely a separate image brought in, but because it's hand drawn, it all kind of works together. And yeah, the progress photo, I mainly post those because a lot of my work now is digitally inverted. Just when it comes to it, I just really like the look of the inverted style. So I like to kind of let people see the original compared to the inverted and things like that. This might sound really weird, but anything I share, I feel like I would like to see that from another artist doing the same thing as well. Like as much as there's all the color, the inversion, everything, that's cool. But I also want to see what the original looks like. You kind of compare the two. So I always try and show close-ups of those.
Well, like one difference I'm noticing between the original and the final is if you look at the skull, you have more of that circle kind of thing, like the logo on the final there.
Yeah.
So was that an edit that you guys did after the fact or digital?
Yeah, so that circle is another logo of theirs that someone else has made. I can't remember who made that one. So if I can remember correctly, once I showed them either the sketch or the final thing, it was just an idea of what do we think about replacing that with the logo, because it's kind of the shape fits.
Yeah.
And I believe that the original one with that symbol on is still used somewhere in the album, I'm sure, but it just for the cover, you've got that glowing, the circle logo. Yeah. Everything else on there is on the original, I believe.
That's cool. Well, I think too, like what's so neat about your work is I've commented on this on the show before, but you're not just using a symmetry tool in Photoshop or Procreate. And while everything has this balance, you can see the different variations that are balanced but not perfectly symmetrical, like the constellation shapes, or on the one pattern on next to the tree shape, it's, you know, down and the other one's up. And I like finding the little subtle things that are different across the two sides, because I feel like it adds to that level of thought and care. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, because my brain definitely always leans towards symmetry, but not perfection.
Yeah.
So, like you say, if I could easily draw half of a piece, stick it in Photoshop, flip it, and then it'd just look awful. But if I can flip my pencil sketch, make that as symmetrical as it's ever going to get, and then ink it as one, for me, that's like the perfect balance. Because, like you say, you get the organic lines, you get the little details. I'm really grateful you've picked up on that, because in a lot of my work, at first glance, it will be the same pattern, but I will kind of flip either like solid colors and lined colors. I'll flip them on either side. So for anyone who can and pick those up, for me, that's like a massive compliment, because it shows you've obviously taken the time to look and compare and things like that. And even for the people who don't look at it that closely, that's absolutely fine. But again, it comes back to how I look at work. I'm constantly zooming in on people. Say zooming in, it's all digital now, but I'd love to zoom in on the original, just to see similar things like that, or see like the line weights they've used, or the characters in the line from it being hand drawn. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
And I think it's a testament too to what I view as like something being a great piece of art, because I do take a lot of I think good art needs to have that immediate impact that you're like immediately it has that reaction that you're like, this is awesome. But then when you dig deeper, there's more things to discover and find. So like that balance is really key. And, you know, your work has an iconic look, so that immediate impact is hit with that aspect that I think is just natural to you. So
yeah, cool, I love seeing that in other people's work as well. So that's something I've really, really pushed for my own. So thank you again. Yeah, I love pieces that do kind of stand out from a distance, but that aren't always like just a mash of detail. That it's like, yeah, it stands out from a distance. Because I always imagine pieces of work in a gallery where you have a full empty room and you can stand at the back if you want, and that piece will look a certain way from where you stood at the back. But as you start to walk forward, things come into play and you notice different things, to the point where you're like nose to nose pretty much, and you can see all this, the character of, again, the line weight and everything. And if I can get that in my work from being up close and at the back of the room, that's exactly where I want to be for mine. Like, I love some of the simplistic work as well, like the super clean, like bold stuff. I love that. But I feel like there's not as much to read visually with that. And that's absolutely fine. But for me, I really need like a more of a story as you zoom in on it.
That's awesome. So shifting to, these are some other pieces you've created for Halo Effect. Anything come to mind with these?
So these are pieces of work for the singles that they released. The one on the left, the red and the blue, I can't remember if that was for the first album or the second.
Detonate's on this latest album. I was just listening to it earlier today.
Right,
really good track.
Yeah. Let me remember correctly. There's the skull with the crown, I believe. So in some of the early briefs that I got from Michael, that wasn't super detailed. He loves, I think the band loves generally, for me to pick out symbols that have a Swedish origin and that mean a lot to their country. And I believe the skull and the crown, or the crown and the fire, there's something in there that's like, it's a symbol from something within Sweden. And I'm annoyed I forget. So that's where that came from. I'm sure the roses have some symbolism as well. And I can't put my finger on it. So basically, that's me kind of taking different elements, arranging them into a piece. And again, the layouts for these were done by Nicholas Sundin, I believe. And I think that the one on the left, again, might have ended up on a shirt for merch.
Be a good design.
The one on the right. So that's the original version of the first album cover, the main chunk of it. But on the original album, on the first album, sorry, it's inverted. So they flipped it back. I think they've trimmed a lot of the edges and used it for this. And the idea for the horse mermaid thing is, again, I was literally Googling like Stockholm symbolism and motifs, ornaments, everything I could find. And there are two like symmetrical ornaments on one of the main bridges they have over there on the gate on either side. So I've kind of taken that idea and made it, I mean, dead, weird, and skulls and kind of thing, put my own touch on it. But they enjoyed this kind of a mix of, I've not just kind of copied the image, but they know, and it's not super obvious, but they know it's like a nod to like this kind of detail. Then a lot of the background and pattern stuff is just me just kind of figuring out layout wise what works best, what doesn't detract too much from the two beasts, but also what complements them. And I think the border work on that's different to the original album as well, I think, because some of these borders I use for the inlays, like throughout the vinyls and things. I'll make like independent borders so that different images can go within. Color wise, I can't remember if we, again, for the one on the left, for the red and the blue, I'm sure there's a reason we have the red, the blue, and the yellow. But the green on the right, that's so at the time that I started putting these together, I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I don't know if you play video games much, but there really. the green glow is used quite a lot in that game. So I decided to just try it out in these early sketches, and they loved it, and it just worked. And looking back now, it absolutely fits their style, their brand, everything. And I owe it to Assassin's Creed just for that little green.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That's funny. So showing some of the process here. Tell me a little bit about these.
So this is a personal piece of mine, like I said, that I do in between commissions. The full pencil sketch has been scanned in and kind of roughed up a little bit because it's an old scanner now, so it kind of still loses some of the details even on the pencil. I enjoy sharing full pencil sketches, just again because I'd love to see it as well from other artists. And then I'm not sure if I shared some of the process before the details, but I like to get super in there. And for the personal work, because I don't plan on it ever being used. So for merchandise and things like that, I'm always aware of too many details that are just going to get lost in printing on a shirt. Right. So I have to be really aware of that. Whereas my personal work and album artwork, I can go in as much as I can. This ended up getting used for merchandise for a band called Darth, I believe. They picked that up. So some of my personal pieces do get
from Atlanta, from where I'm at.
Amazing band, yeah, great guys. Yeah. They're coming on tour near me soon, so I'm getting to go meet them. So that'll be really cool. It's always nice when I get to meet bands I've worked with. Yeah.
Well, they seem really nice from interviews too, which is cool.
Yeah. I mean, for guys that are that insanely talented, to be that down to earth is, I think, quite rare now. But yeah, it's really nice. I actually did their album artwork as well.
I forgot to pull that up, but
yeah, that was cool. But yeah, they picked up this one for merchandise along with the album. They've had a couple of other pieces as well. But that, when I kind of go all in on the detail, that I enjoy sort of, like, again, it's all social media, seeing artwork now. There's no up close holding work. I say no, it's rare, I think, for people to hold other people's work up close. So if I can kind of give a bit of a perspective that's like as close as I can, I know I'd appreciate seeing all the details going into it. Because I think sometimes they can get lost to a degree once they're scanned in and inverted and things like that. And once I add a lot of the digital textures, I think some of the details can get lost. So it's nice just to see close-ups and all the line work and stuff.
Absolutely, man. When it comes to, patterns and creating stuff, you definitely like have a way of interpreting, patterns from like different cultures and time periods and stuff. Like when you're mapping out a piece, kind of what's your thought process in terms of like pairing things that maybe like even come from different cultures, but like making it your own? Because I'm kind of working through that right now myself.
Yeah. I tend not to overthink it. I wait and kind of see where the piece is going to, whether it's kind of more primal patterns or like on this that are kind of more modern, the floral Baroque stuff. I kind of just wait and see, really, to be honest. Sometimes I do get urges to kind of go more primal, primitive, kind of more like bold, direct line work, and then I'll do that for a while, and then I'll get a craving for a lot of the Baroque stuff. So I don't overthink it. I'll see what feels best for the piece, and just go from there, really.
Yeah. So these are a bit different, especially the one on the left.
Yeah. So these are two personal pieces again. The skulls, the two skeletons on the left, I made that with the purpose. So a lot of my work has a lot of background details and kind of things. I almost see it as like a 3D. You have your main image, you have your border, your details, and then like light rays kind of at the back. And I kind of try and see it as a 3D. I really wanted to go all in on the details and the ink work and the stippling and the textures, and have no background, and see how much that sat forward. And because I think it's nice to kind of just question sometimes how much detailing you're putting in a little bit. And I wanted to see again, like what stood out, what got lost.
Right.
The two skeletons are drawn on one sheet together as one. The circle and the skull at the top is one piece, and then the two symbols either side, I think I drew one of those, and then copied them for the digital layout. The lines and the frame are digital. Obviously, all the colours are digital. And the diamond initials at the bottom, I played with that for a while. You see it on the other one as well, a variation of it. I kind of go through different signatures and motifs for different works, and none of them stick, so I end up just forgetting about them. So if anyone sees just random like little shapes and initials, that's just me just trying to see what works. That did get picked up by a band a very long time ago, and I can't remember who, so I apologize for that. The one on the right, I made as part of a set of, I think it was 5 prints, I believe. It was part of a collection that came with a bookmark and I believe a wooden plaque that was laser cut. So I wanted to make like a set of prints, all different, but all the same border and different images in the middle. And that's when I was just getting to grips with the textures and like the old paper look. Mm-hmm. I definitely want to make time for another set of prints as a collection. I've done one since then, and they're a lot of fun, and I really loved how they came out, and they were really well received as well. Because they were almost like you couldn't buy them separate; they weren't available separate, and then once they're sold out, they're gone. So that's definitely on my list to make again. And again, the border is drawn as one. The decorations in the corner, the motifs, I believe they're part of the border as one as well. But the main skull down to the bottom of the sword, that's a separate piece brought in.
Okay.
Yeah, because I used the frame over all pieces and kind of brought in different pieces.
Very cool. What roughly was the year that you created that one then on the right?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if that. Okay. Maybe not quite that long. So a while ago. So you can see I'm still in that style, but in terms of layouts and ways to approach it, I keep trying different things. And like the color works more. The one on the left, actually, I've had a couple of different versions of that with different colors and a couple of different frames. But this one I'm showing is kind of the one that I landed on that is where I needed to be. Yeah. And that's helped. The white highlights on that are digital. And I found that really helped with the details and the contrast and the tones and stuff. So I've done that in a lot of pieces after that. So that was a big learning one for me, was that actually.
Well, I love the one on the left, the like kind of like hidden shapes. It's implied that you know where the snake goes, but then it goes into the darkness, like adds a really cool depth and lets the mind kind of like figure it all out instead of just like spoon feeding it to you, which is really cool.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's something I had in mind, because you almost, I think this goes back to the simple lines, letting your brain kind of fill in the rest. I feel like this is probably a similar approach in terms of not being scared to go all in with the shadows, because your brain will follow the snake shape. It will fill in the blanks rather than trying to kind of explain everything all the time. Yeah, I appreciate that you picked up on that.
Totally. All right, so I was listening to this earlier today to prep for the interview. Man, what a great album.
Oh, yeah.
Dude,
it sums up their career in one album. Yeah, it sums up everything they do, I think, in one album. It's amazing. So this one was a fun one. So the guys in Paradise Lost actually live about 20 minutes away from me.
Oh, cool.
So color-wise, this is basically, so where we live is a lot of hills, a lot of moorland, and a hell of a lot of bad weather, which we're known for complaining about, but I think we secretly love it. So I really wanted like a lot of the earthy greens and different tones in that sense, and like the kind of stone effect behind. I wanted to get, and the rose in the middle is actually what they call the Yorkshire rose, which is from our area. There's the couple. It goes back to a lot of the historical stuff. There's different roses in different parts of the region, and the white Yorkshire rose is kind of like our rose type thing. So once I did a load of digital sketches, I knew what colours I really wanted to go for, because I was a fan of the band beforehand. So this was a really good one. This was really fun for me to do. I knew the colours I wanted, and I knew I really wanted to try and get a Yorkshire rose in there, again, just as kind of a nod to us all coming from the same area. I knew the colour scheme would go down, I think. I was really sceptical about the rose. But because the brief was basically just the album title, Obsidian. That's the only brief I got. So I was like, right, okay. So I looked into that a little bit, into the history of these obsidian stone and what they were used for. And it's kind of a bit witchcrafty, I think, which I didn't want to go too into for the band, because I want to lean on more like the gothic side of things. So I just included the rose in the early sketches, sent it kind of not expecting it for it to take. They loved it. There was no changes, which is bonkers to even think about now. Framing, it's rare, but it's nice when it happens. And the rose ended up on a shirt with all the nails round, that I think worked out really well. That was nice. That was something their graphics person kind of put together, like I say, from the different parts of what I'd done. And I did all the inlay as well for that, all the different lyric sheets and things. So that had the same running theme all the way through. But yeah, that was probably the biggest band I'd worked with at that point, if not still. And I have a lot of friends who are big fans. So that was a nice little kind of, when I kept it quiet for a while, because a couple of the guys I'm in a band with, they're big fans. So I kept it quiet, and then once it had all finalised, I don't like risking, I mean, I'm not superstitious, but I don't like risking jinxing things by telling people too early.
Yeah,
like if I say it too early, it's all going to crumble. So I kind of waited a little bit. So that was really nice. And I see the odd friend now with a shirt on, so that's a nice little touch. But yeah, that was a fun one. I just kind of went all in and rolled with whatever feedback I was going to get, and thankfully they liked it. So, and it's even sweeter that the album's incredible as well. That definitely helps.
Yeah, I think it actually is my favorite Paradise Lost album personally, because they're one of those bands that's gone through different eras, but I kind of like what they're doing now the most, really, or like in terms of 2020s, and you could even start from like 2015 onwards, but just like, they're just really good songwriting. I like the clean vocals and the melody and the gothic atmosphere, and the production is just incredible on it too. It just sounds really damn good.
It's nice when you can see and hear a band not compromise, but absolutely hone the craft. And I feel like these are one of them. That even like you say, down to the production, it's modern, but it still suits the style of what they do. And it's for a band to have that much self-awareness and to not rely on what got them popular in the first place, for me, is like I hold in quite high regard. And I can't wait to see what they do next.
Absolutely. And with this piece too, like sometimes I like to think like, what makes this image successful, or what if something was missing, would the piece be less? And like for me, that outer shape that almost mimics the shape of the rose, that kind of, it's like a rough diamond shape, but has the organic curves. If that wasn't there, it'd be missing a lot. So it's like that adds a ton of like extra dimension to it. Really cool, man.
I appreciate that. I've never really thought of that as being similar to a rose flower shape, but I see it now. That's cool.
It just seeps its way in there.
Yeah. And I don't know if, because I never got any lyrics or anything for this. Like I say, I just got literally just the album title and got told to kind of go for it. So I'm wondering what the two hearts, where they came from. I'm not sure, but I think I might have read about the witchcraft thing of like the whole heart voodoo thing. I don't know, maybe that come into it, but it's always interesting looking back because this is like quite a few years ago now. I mean, can you remember when the album was released?
It's like 2022 or maybe even earlier than that. I'll look it up real quick. It
might be even a little bit earlier, yeah, maybe.
Might be 2020.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So yeah, looking back, it's always interesting. Because I get so
I love too how organic this one is, just overall. Like, I mean, obviously you got the hearts, but like all the shapes are very organic. Like you're leaning into that. It's 2020, by the way.
Yeah.
What about to say?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's gone.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's all good. I'm just kind of. I've not looked at this piece properly for a while now. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I'm sure a lot of illustrators do this as well, or just people working with bands generally. Once a project gets ticked off and done, if you've other stuff lined up, you just get your head down and repeat, and then in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, whenever you look back at a piece and you kind of almost see it with, I don't know if it's fresh eyes, different eyes, or something, but you kind of, I wonder what made me put certain details in. So that's always interesting.
Well, what are you questioning
the teeth
now?
Have always been a thing. Yeah, the teeth, I've always, in fact, I consciously told myself to stop drawing teeth for a while because they were just, I don't know where they were coming from, but they were popping up in every single piece. But I don't know. Again, I think that goes back to me not overthinking something until I need to overthink it. Because it's like using the skull. It's the most overdone motif in rock and metal generally, no doubt. But my brain just goes, stick a skull in it. And I kind of go, yeah, fair enough. If that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. And I kind of, I'm aware of it being a strong kind of repeat, but I'm not too worried.
I mean, everyone kind of repeats it. I mean, I find myself doing it too. I think what's cool about it is like, it's very relatable. And then for me, I like, whenever I'm doing something from imagination, whenever you can pull back to something that exists in real life and has, meanings deeper than just what you see on the image, it's cool because you can get that level of realism in your piece that then makes the imaginative part even more based in more like it could exist. You know what I mean? So like that's one way that I like to use skulls. They give you that point.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. Because I love doing like animal skulls as well. Yeah. I think it's having that organic element mixed with a lot of the pattern work. Having that relationship for me works.
Definitely. There's just another piece in close up. Anything come to mind with this one?
This was another personal piece. Again, I just went all in with the details again, and I really wanted to play with the symmetrical kind of sets of three, and the Ouroboros always comes up for me. So anytime I get to work with that, I'm happy, and anytime I get to practice hands as well, I'm happy because they always need work. This also got picked up by a band, and I can't remember who again. Oh, I'm so terrible. They're going to hate me. But yeah, I was. It's always nice when personal work gets picked up because it's kind of the perfect balance of me having full freedom and then it going to a home and getting used and kind of getting put to use rather than just kind of being an original stuck in a pile. So I'm always grateful for that. Yeah. But again, I feel like a lot of the stippling details will probably get lost in the final scan piece. A lot of the line work within the ornate kind of circle, a lot of that will get lost. So it's just to kind of show why it takes so long, I think, just to prove.
I feel you. It's beautiful too, like just seeing everything up close and the different textures and everything. It's really cool. Have you heard of I don't know why this piece in particular is reminding me of him, but have you heard of Adrian Baxter?
Yes.
His art? I feel like I don't know. I just felt like you would like his stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I mentioned before about me not doing the thick outline experiment, I believe he was one of the artists that kind of spurred that on, because his line work is so, I want to say, gentle, and I mean that in the most.
He works with a brush too.
Really? Oh, that's probably why. Then I assumed
insane.
Oh wow.
Yeah, a really tiny brush.
He's got that touch that kind of it lets things breathe perfectly, but his details and things like that perfect. And I feel like his line weights match the look of what he's drawing perfectly, if that makes sense. I've only ever really thought that. I've not actually said that out loud, so I don't know if that sounds strange.
No, I feel you.
You know, he's got that kind of old-timey, nautical, mythical look, and I think the line work is absolutely perfect. I don't know if my line work would align with what he's drawing as much. I don't know.
I think maybe it's because this one, you have the hands and the snake as part of the pattern. Maybe that's what made, and the filigree, details. Yeah. That just made me think of him a little bit, because a lot of his repeating patterns would be more like organic and slightly on the whimsy side in a cool way.
Yeah. I love his work. Definitely a big fan.
Yeah. So then we got these two.
Yeah, these are two personal pieces again. You can see the three on the right. Again, the three motif. In fact, you can see it on both of these. So the one on the left with the gold edging, that was an experiment with, so you see the three sections, each of them are one piece that I've drawn, and then I've arranged that digitally, because my plan was to play about with it digital, print it out, and then ink over that and kind of play around with that, just as an experiment, just to kind of change things up and see what the process looked like. And it ended up just staying as it is. And then the kind of demon head in the middle, that's a separate piece that I've put in, because I've had different things in the middle of that one over the years. I've size-wise and different symbols and things. And I've also played with the colours. I'm sure there's a full coloured piece, the full coloured version of that as well. Some weeks I just go all in on just trying things out, seeing how far I can push it or pull back, whichever. And I've used that as a learning piece, again, like the other one, as a learning piece for kind of when to push details, when they get lost, when when I can kind of go all in. So that's benefited other work. The piece on the right, the three skulls, three snakes, and the main skull, that's one solid piece. And the inner circle with the spirals, that's drawn in with those as well. And then the outer border is drawn separate, because I weren't sure with the sizing of that. And in fact, if I remember correctly, I drew the central elements not really planning on having a border. So I think I drew those, they were finished. And then the more I looked at it, I thought a nice circle kind of symbolized border could work. So I just experimented with that. And both of these, I think, were when I really started to take the coloring experimentation seriously as well. Because I flick from bold colors to faded, muted ones. And I kind of wait and see which work best for each piece. And I think sometimes like having a one or two really bold colours kind of works for certain ones. And then other times I'll look at them and I think they look really sickly and digital and inorganic, and I kind of change them. So I'm, like I say, I'm still getting to grips with what I feel like works for me. But it's all good fun trying it out. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And like what kind of fits the client too, in the case that it's a commissioned piece like this would be like the opposite of the halo effect, where it's more bright and kind of like a futuristic kind of look to it, which is cool.
Yeah, well, on the first album cover, I was experimenting with like a glow effect. In the Skull Eye Sockets, I was adding like a really bright, it was usually green with like a bit of a glow in my personal work. And they picked up on that and was like, we'd love to use that. So that's where that came from. And it's popped up in a few pieces. And I try and kind of add that same glow effect to snakes as well, to try and get almost, not so much 3D, but kind of get a bit more depth from it and a bit of shine. And again, like let your eyes kind of put things together. And because I don't know if anyone's ever picked up on this with my work, and I would never expect it. But I always find that any shading and light for my work comes from the top. So I instinctively, like the snakes, you can see all the underside is dark and all the top is kind of light.
Right.
And I've never really sat down and thought, oh, it'd be really cool if all my pieces had a top-down light. It's just something that's happened over the years, and I've kind of just rolled with it and gone, right, fair enough. So sometimes I had highlights to the top of the snake just to kind of bring that out a little bit.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I think, this is the last one here, but just more examples of, the hand-drawn piece, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the far left with the horse skull, that's actually... So I like the look of how the photo came out, because that's got the ink sheet over the pencil work and the light pad is turned on.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep, that looks familiar.
Yeah, so I really liked kind of that I got all the paper textures out of that as well. So that stayed, because normally it's just kind of a photo of the pencil. There's no need for the light, but I just kind of like that one. The middle one was another personal piece. I don't think that one got picked up because that's more of like a portrait picture style rather than like suited for merchandise type thing. Because a lot of the isolated circular ones, they tend to kind of get picked up more for merch, whereas this has like a full frame round. And I've never been a fan of like the portrait on a shirt shape, really. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Yeah. The one on the far right was an album cover for a musician called Yellow Wolf that's completely could not be more different to my usual music style. He's a rapper and a country artist. He does a bit of all sorts. And I think so him and the other musician the other rapper, who collaborated on that album, they both found my work, I believe, on Instagram and got in touch, and their manager got in touch. And the brief was so good that I'd never even questioned what they did. Not that I would ever. Like I'm not like, I don't pick and choose genres generally. If I can line up with their view and their brief, I'm all in. I'll do it. And that was one that they just kind of, I don't know if they gave me a few examples of my own work to go from, but I just rolled with it, and that's a nice circular piece with a separate bit of a border work. And I was happy with how that came out. Given,
do you recall the brief?
No, I don't think there was much of a brief other than just references of my own work that they liked.
Oh, okay.
That kind of so the album's called Black Sheep, hence the skull. I think that's the only thing really I was going on. And I'm just trying to think of other elements that were in it, but it was fully like there's so much detail in there. I just again went all in Because it's like if someone tells me they have no kind of major ideas, just go for it. Chances are I'm going to go for it and kind of expect a little pushback rather than to go all in. But this one came together nicely, so I was happy with that one.
It's perfect. Close this up. All right. So, approaching the end, Adrian, I just want to say thank you again, man. This is a ton of fun. You've shared a lot of great nuggets for myself and then also for the viewers. It is a tradition to end on just one last piece of advice from the guest. Anything else that you can think of that you share that might help other people out that want to get more involved in working with bands and getting into this kind of illustration scene?
Yeah, something that I learned quite early on that benefited, or I feel definitely benefited my work, was kind of draw. So if I'll use myself as an example, I wanted to draw for metal bands. At that time, I wanted my work to be used for metal bands in various ways, albums, shirts, everything. So I started to see my work as like a mock-up album cover, a mock-up shirt design. It wasn't getting used. It was just my own personal work. But I learned to kind of draw what I would love to see on a shirt or something like that. And I feel like that definitely helped me kind of learn where I wanted to go with it. But it also helps with getting the right eyes on your work. So if a band's looking for an illustrator that works on merchandise designs, that work on clothing, certain shapes and designs are going to stand out. So that was, for me, that was quite a big learning point in terms of like having an aim within your work. And I don't know if everyone would ever get that, but I feel like if someone wanted to go into book covers, you draw to suit a book cover. Right. I'm not saying every single piece has to be looking like a book cover, but have intention in your work of where you want to kind of push it. And I would say 9 times out of 10, that would organically come together. You would find your audience. You would find the particular eyes that will get you into those projects.
Absolutely. I think that makes a ton of sense, and I can improve at that. So it's a good reminder for myself too. But yeah, for everybody watching, please follow Adrian on Instagram, Facebook. Anything else that you'd want to plug? Do you have any prints or originals or anything that you're currently promoting or selling?
I have an imprint account which has a handful of prints. There's a link on my Instagram, like the link tree, and there's all kinds of things on there. And I appreciate you having me on. I feel like having people like yourself allow a voice for not just for established illustrators and artists, but for, like we said, people just starting out on the journey, in the middle of the journey, everyone, all across, at whatever point you're on. Yeah. Platforms like this, I think, are invaluable, and I'm very grateful to be included.
I appreciate that. Well, everybody, thank you again. See you probably in a couple of weeks, and have a good one.